Now in the third and last unit, we are going to talk about other types of research which can really be seen in conjunction, or it can also be seen as a separate sets of researches that can be taken up by the students. One is historical research, experimental research, ex post facto research and survey research. So let's take them one by one. Historical research, as the name itself suggests, the purpose of historical research is to understand and explain past events and phenomena. It contributes to the knowledge of the present as well as the future, because we all try to understand what had developed in the past so that you can really see, have a better perspective of the present, and it helps in understanding how things came into being and changed over time. For example, we can really look at the coverage of partition of India in 1947 by Indian print media in Bengal and Punjab, because these were the two areas which got partitioned, and it will be a good study to look at through archival papers, through documents, through different libraries, to go and see, collect those documents and try to understand how print media at that point of time focused on the division which happened on religious grounds, and how the newspapers covered a very sensitive issue, because it will actually help us to examine the present state of media and its coverage in the in these kind of current situation in a more deep way. Second area is experimental studies. These are generally done in laboratory systems or even in the field settings. In fact, experimental studies perhaps would be called the mother of all research studies, because they are very systematic, they follow a procedure, and they define the rigor, they define the value of any study, because it has a control, it has a randomization, and it has a degree of independent variable which can be provided to look at its impact, direct impact, cause and effect impact on the dependent variable. And the results of experiments have higher internal validity, whereas low external validity. So if you are doing a lab experiment, the degree of control on extraneous variables and environment is high in laboratory experiments. But whereas in field experiments which are conducted in real life situations, control can be exercised to a certain extent, but it will have a reasonable external validity and relatively lower internal validity. An experimental research is best method of ascertaining the cause and effect relationship. For example, conducting lab experiments of exposure to violent games, video on young people has given us a good understanding of does it really lead to more aggressive behavior. Now third one is ex post facto research. Ex post facto research is used in ascertaining the causes of an effect. In Latin, ex post facto means after the fact. In ex post facto research, also known as causal comparison design, researchers identify the possible causes of an effect that has already occurred. Now, the goal of ex post facto research is to determine whether the independent variable affected the dependent variable, or it did not show any kind of positive correlation. With that objective, researchers compare two or more than two groups of subjects. For example, a researcher can conduct a study to determine if the college workshop, which has already happened, had a positive effect on the test scores of participants. Here you cannot really manipulate, because this is something which is outside the purview of a researcher. Here the researcher compares test scores of participants of workshop with scores of non-attendee students, and then a comparative analysis of the data can indicate a positive relationship between the students' test scores and their participation in the workshop. So it's actually very close to correlation study. Now, the last in the list is survey research. Now, survey is a method and survey is also an approach. Now, method of gathering information from a sample of individuals can be done, and it can be done to actually bring out information on any topic of interest. Now, sociological variables which can be examined in a survey can include gender, age, education, economic status, income, occupation, political and religious affiliation, which is generally what we call as a demographic data. And the psychological variables can include beliefs, attitudes, opinion, which again can be put in kind of a CAP study, which is knowledge, attitude and behavior. And the surveys are called sample surveys because data collected from sample is drawn from a given population. And survey research is used by media houses to assess audience needs and patterns in media usage. Public opinion research agency also gauge public opinion and forecast election outcomes. So it's a very important way to really go on the spot survey, but you can also have extensive surveys across a population which can comprise of several population groups, communities, to get a more wholesome idea of what is the current state of knowledge or belief regarding any phenomena. Now, the data collection tools and techniques in survey are drawn from qualitative, can be quantitative, precisely because of the time factor. But if you really want to have an in-depth idea about your respondents, you can also position some qualitative survey, which is through focus group discussion also. So, you have different tools. The broad areas that we have is face-to-face in surveys, questionnaires, telephone survey, online surveys, and each type has certain advantages and disadvantages, because we have seen that face-to-face surveys are very high on cost and there's a time factor also. The best is of course conducting an online survey, because telephone surveys are almost, because the number of telephones in India is going down and number of mobile phones is going up. So, the best bet is to really conduct online surveys. And that can be using a certain format, can be designed, but it's still at a nascent stage. So, the best bet right now would be a mail questionnaire that can be done, and response rate is little low in case mail questionnaire or an online survey is sent. So, it has to be done on the ground through face-to-face interviews. So, let us hope in this section, unit 3, we have discussed another set and types of research which a researcher should actually know about and can really think in trying to initiate himself or herself into research culture and discipline. So, I hope what we have studied will really take you forward in understanding that there are different ways of doing research, but there is a behavior and there is a cardinal principle applied in research, that you have to follow a procedure, set of codes of conduct in terms of how to collect data, how to approach research in terms of what kind of phenomena you want to study, and whether your focus is to study only one variable or you would like to really have a more explanatory type of research which gives you a very comprehensive understanding of a phenomena and different variables, dependent variables. And we hope that you will use this as only a takeoff to get into reading more books, more reference literature which is given in your module, and also there are a lot of online resources available for you to look at, and they can help you to devise a protocol for undertaking a research, because I think a small pilot research is a very important thing to do. For example, I can give you from my own personal experience. I just wanted to, when I looked at language newspapers, I found that most of the news pertained to more about, there was no mention of women as such, and most of the information about women was written by men. So, I just tried to look at that most of the regional newspapers have very little information about. So, it's an exploratory study, it's a pilot study looking at the mainstream media, whereas English newspapers you will find that there is more news on women written by women, but on the other hand you will look at regional newspapers, there is very little information on women. So, it gives you an understanding that all this effort to bring women into a kind of a more empowered role would require a little more effort by different organizations which are trying to mobilize women and give them more exposure and opportunities. Thank you very much, and I hope this will be the starting point for you.